Yay. All right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to GAAC.
Yay.
Tonight, our speaker is Ed Ting. He's a well-known amateur astronomer. He's written for several magazines, or articles for several magazines, including Sky and Telescope, Astronomy, Discover, and Popular Mechanics, among others. His science-themed YouTube channel gets 2 million views a year. And tonight he's going to be telling us about his trip to Stonehenge during the solstice. Please welcome Ed Ting.
Yay.
All right.
Wow.
So I'm going to talk for about 35 minutes. That's how long this talk usually lasts. And about 95% of what I'm going to say, anybody here can do if they want to, and it actually doesn't cost very much. So by the way, I used to start every talk by saying, "Can you hear me?" And then at the end of one of my talks, some guy came up to me and he said, "I can't hear you. How can I tell you I can't hear you?" So I'm just going to trust Michael's has the sound and the audio and the video is all set up and everything's going to be working. Okay.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. All right. So, did the slide advance for you people on Zoom? Yes. Okay, good. All right. So how this all got started is I was in a grad program at Dartmouth and we have an exchange program with Oxford University. We go over there and they come over here and I think we get the better part of that deal. But apparently they're very excited to come up to the woods in New Hampshire. I have no idea why. It's nothing special going on up there. But I was part of a writing program and it was with Exeter College, which is a part of Oxford. And that's where I was in the summer of 22, 23. And I was going to go back in 23 for the writing program again, but they said, they have other programs in other colleges around Oxford. And so I took a course on archaeology with ancient British monuments. And one of the field trips was to Stonehenge. And the professor said, you seem pretty interested in all of this stuff. Let me give you a bunch of books to read. And so I found myself back there 6 months later at the winter solstice at Stonehenge, because she said, if you think it's nuts here now, you should be here because it gets very interesting around these parts during the solstice. And she says, go to the winter one first because it gets 10% of the population that the summer one does. You're not going to get anywhere near Stonehenge in the summer, but the winter nobody wants to go and it's England and it's cold and dreary and so on. All right. So this was last summer. And that's in the middle of Christ Church College. And so if you don't know Oxford, we here in the United States have a pretty good understanding of what a college is. Usually there's like a big steeple at one end and a big college green and then, buildings around. They don't do it that way in England, okay? So Oxford is actually an umbrella term encompassing 40 semi-autonomous colleges. So the first year I was at Exeter. So this year I was at Christ Church. So a lot of Americans have trouble with that concept because when you ask, say, Kate Beckinsale or Hugh Grant where they went to college, they will say, I went to New College. And we have no idea what that means. Okay. And then, oh yes, I went to Oxford. And okay, I understand what that means now. So these semi-autonomous colleges are just these giant squares. And they're so independent that you could be right next to another college and you could ask a tourist, like, where's that next college? And the person who is in this one will not know where that is because they spend their entire time inside that. So the picture on the left, this is me doing my best impression of trying to be a proper English gentleman. That's what they show you in all the brochures. On the right-hand side, that is the reality. So Oxford is the oldest English-speaking college in the Western world. There's evidence of teaching taking place as early as 1069. And back then, there wasn't much to learn. So most of what you learned was the Bible, right? So most of what you had to learn. So many of the colleges are named after places or people of antiquity from the Bible. So this is Christ Church, and there's a Jesus College, and there's a Mary Magdalene College. Except in England they don't say Magdalene, they say Magdalene. So if you walk by Magdalene and you say Magdalene, they will know you're not from the area. So we're giving you some basic survival skills if they're in Oxford. So that was my dorm room. And I mean, they cut the thing out of stone from whatever, 1,000 years ago, whatever. The floor was sloped. And so I would have to sleep on the right side of the bed, hoping that I would wake up on the left side of the bed and not on the floor. And people were complaining about the sloped floors. I heard a woman complaining that the stopper did not form a tight seal around the drain of the sink, you know, and I hate saying it was an American, okay? And then just complaining to the staff, and the British, they're very polite, yes, oh, sorry, but you know what the guy's thinking, right? So, all right, so here are some definitions. So a monument is any prehistoric structure made of stone to remind people of an event or a place. A henge is anything that is circular, and a barrows is this thing on the right, sort of looks like a hobbit residence. And it's been since surprisingly recently when they have actually made it illegal for you to go into these things. So these things have been around for a long time, and by now, most of these, if not all of them, have been grave robbed. So the remains have been disturbed. It's really hard to try to reconstruct what has happened in a lot of these places. So this is Stonehenge from the air, and it's thought to be about 4,500 years old. And the way that we know that is there are 3 or 4 independent ways that we can use to determine about how old this thing is. And when you rewind time, they seem to intersect at a point around 4,500 years ago. So this is a long time ago, and Stonehenge is the most famous of them. And here's what we found. And this is what the professor told us. He says, the more we know about Stonehenge, the more we realize what we don't know. So every time you answer one question, it seems to raise 2 or 3 other questions behind it. So after taking a whole course on this, the conclusion of the class was, we don't really know anything, you know? So it could have been any of those 3 things, because there's evidence of ritual burials having taken place there. And it does appear to be, at least partly, an astronomical clock, because parts of it are aligned with certain events throughout the year. But why they made it, how they made it, well, nobody really knows. So these henges is interesting. There are hundreds of them in the British Isles and a little bit scattered around that area of the world. And they made them for hundreds of years. You see them in that part of the world and hardly anywhere else in the world. Okay, and they did this for hundreds of years, like close to 1,000 years. And then just as abruptly, as they started making them, suddenly they just stopped doing it. So nobody really knows why that is, but there was a collective consciousness at this point in history that we are all going to do these things. And then they did them for several hundred years, and then they just stopped doing them. And nobody really knows why. Okay, I mean, the methods of communication, like communicate to that guy in the northern part of I mean, it just didn't happen. They just started doing it. So we do know some things. The stones came from anywhere from dozens of miles to hundreds of miles away. And this is one of the mysteries, because the quarries are in the northern part of England and Stonehenge is sort of in the southern part of England. So what they have done is they figured out the northern part of England is slightly higher than Stonehenge. So there is a net elevation drop from where you cut the stone from where you bring the stone. So that helps you. However, there are relative maxima and minima along the way, where at some point you're going to have to drag the stones uphill. So how did they do that? So these stones weigh 20 to 30, up to 20 to 30 tons. And so they tried to reenact some of this stuff. And this is how we think we did it. They cut logs, and you pull, and then there's one person at the end who takes the log when it's used up and it puts it on their front, and you keep going. So here's the interesting part. At some point, there are 2 or 3 points where you cannot avoid going uphill. Okay, so when you take into account the weight of the stone, the coefficient of friction between the stone and the logs in the ground, and whatever the strength of an average human being, how much they can, how many watts they can pull, and the tensile strength of whatever you're likely to be using as rope, which is probably a form of hemp. Okay, it depends who you are listening to. They may or may not have been, it may or may not have been possible for them to do this. You listen to, okay? So, and if you think about it, like, what, how did they know that they would be able to do this? And if you look at a map, okay, there's actually a section where you can avoid one of the relative maxima uphills if you go across the bay. Okay, so they had a team of students built a watercraft, and they calculated the thing of how it would hold the stone and so forth. And well, maybe that's what they did, is they carried their stuff across the water to save time. So they put the stone on the boat, and the boat sank. There's never been attempted since. So if you stop and think about this, to go hundreds of miles away to a quarry and cut stone and bring it back, you could be talking about several generations of people. Okay, I mean, by the time you got back, is there any guarantee that, oh yeah, we stopped doing that 100 years ago, right? It never happened. There was a collective consciousness that, yep, we're all going to be doing. The person in charge is not going to be alive by the time you get back. You had children who helped you with this, your grandchildren, and several generations later, you come back. So at the visitor center, there is a stone like this, and there's a rope coming out of it, and so and they just put it around your and pull, okay? And so you would do this, and there would be there's a digital readout in front of you showing you how much power you'll have and how many of you it would take to pull that stone. And the number is like astronomical. So it's like, how did they do that? Okay, so another mystery is how did they erect the stones? Well, this is a method that they've used, and they have been able to do this, is that you just sort of hinge the thing upwards. The thing that they have trouble with is there are the vertical pieces, like the horizontal pieces that go on top. No one has been able to figure out how they did that. Every time that they have tried to do this, they have had to resort to some modern means to put that horizontal piece of stone up there. And they've tried things like you build a very shallow ramp, right? And then you ramp it, for some, it didn't work. Okay, so we do know that the horizontal pieces exist because there is this sort of mortise and tenon arrangement that we can see on the top, and some of the vertical stones, you can actually see that little nub at the top has actually survived. So the sarsens are the vertical pieces, the lintels are the horizontal pieces. So this is what we think it looked like at one time. It was a completely enclosed circles, completely around on the top with the horizontal pieces. Those little pieces in the middle are called blue stones, and they're a little bit bluer than the rest of the stones. Those are the smaller ones, and those came from a few dozen miles away, as opposed to a few hundreds of miles away. And they were arranged in semicircles like this, and at some point, at least twice, they have been moved. Okay, why? Nobody knows. And we know that they have been moved because of the post holes that they sat in still exist. And so you can figure out which ones were keyed to which holes. Those post holes have survived all of this time. So the blue stones are like this, and you can see what's left. There aren't very many of them on the right side there, but you can see there is a semicircular or circular configuration there, and possibly even two circles, one inner and one outer. So this is what it looks like today from the air, and you can see some of these stones have been robbed, chipped away. I was talking to somebody here who said he was there in the 1970s, and you could just walk up and touch the thing. That's gone now. They get 1.2 million visitors a year, and they do get some unruly behavior around the stone. So they put a big, you can't get all that close to them today. So. Okay, so this is Stonehenge. This is a bit of a confusing map, but it'll make sense to you in a few minutes here. So this here is Stonehenge. Those are the stones, and you can see that there's another round henge sort of arrangement around it that a lot of people don't notice. The visitor center is like down here, just on the lower right-hand corner. This is the bus route that takes you here. This is 1.25 miles long. So if you don't want to walk through this, you can just take the bus and go there. So the professor said, if you're able to walk, if you're physically able, do the walk, because you can see some interesting things here. You can see that there's a monument here. It looks like a giant football field that's, a couple hundred yards, a couple of miles long. And that is not apparent while you're on it because you can't see it unless you're from the air. You can also see sets of barrows here. There's a long one here, there's here, and there's a long one over here. So it's about a 2 or so mile walk from the visitor center through that monument, and then you kind of come in on the right. This is the parking lot of where the buses go. So it looks like nice and peaceful there, but when you get down there, the grass is like knee high, and they let the goats and the sheep and the cows roam around there. So you do have to be careful where you step. It's actually not that pleasant. And the professor stepped in it a couple of times while giving lectures walking backwards. So let's come here. So this is about 2/3 of the way up, and that is Stonehenge there. And there's a theory that this area was never forested. It was always flat like this, that the location was chosen because it can be seen from miles around. That's what it looks like today. You can see where they're fenced in. This is the people in the back. And you could see the little key at the top here, where that's missing. Now, this is actually a better indication of how close they let you get. Not very close. So that's our class. And so the professor said, there are 2 times of the year where they let people in because there's some sort of religious exemption for the pagans and those are doing the solstice. So for a few hours, every solstice, the summer and the winter, they do open this up and you can come in there. All right, now we do know it's an astronomical clock because this is a thing called the heel stone. And at the summer solstice, the sun rises right over the heel stone and casts a shadow right in along this axis here. In the winter, the sun sets at a point 180 degrees away from where the sun rises in the summertime. So this, obviously it's not going to rise here in the wintertime, it's going to rise like over here because the winters are a lot shorter. But even those numbers do appear to line up with certain gaps within the stones. At the summer solstice, this is the alignment. That notch there is where the sun comes through. Because the Earth has shifted just a little bit in these 4,500 years, the alignment is off a little bit. And so this is one of the methods that they use to determine how old the thing is, because you can rewind time. Well, it's right around 4,500 years ago when that thing would have been perfectly aligned with that notch. Okay, so I'm ready to go. Okay, there is no clear sky clock or astrospheric there, but I was able to get some data. And about 38% of the time there, it's cloudy. So I got a 62% chance we're going to see the sunrise. Okay. This is the forecast for that week when I was going up. I have never seen a forecast like this in my lifetime. It's 11 days worth of rain, clouds, and wind. See that? We complain around here, but apparently in the south of England, they see that quite a bit. So when I go, one trick I have is I try to fly out of Logan. I try to get like a 7 or 8 p.m. flight because between the 6-hour flight and the 6-hour time difference, if you can sleep for 5 hours in the plane, when you wake up, the day begins again and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. It's coming back that hurts because you gotta relive time. Okay. So that's around 5:30 in the morning. And I got a little room at a hotel there. And that was the view out the window. Okay. So the morning that we get there, if anybody wants to do this, the tour bus leaves London at 4 a.m. and you're back at 1 p.m. So you're in, you're out, it's easy. And it's only 99 pounds. Okay. So it's cheap. I found out why it was only 99 pounds. Okay. I don't know what the occupancy restrictions are on buses in England, but they cramp. I'm not a big guy, but I was like, I mean, they had like 68 people in this tiny little bus. And that's the picture on the left. We're starting to leave London. And it's about 2-hour drive. About halfway through, the bus driver stopped the bus, got out, and I saw him raise the hood of the bus. And then raise, and I don't know what was going on, but we lost a lot of time because he was futzing with something. I don't know. By the time we get to Stonehenge, the picture on the right, that is the traffic going into the visitor center. You can see the taillights. It's about a mile away. So the tour guide says, ignore the clock. The clock is wrong. It's not 7:48. It's way off. So he says, don't worry. This happens every year. Okay. We'll get moving in just a minute. 20 minutes later, we're still standing right here. Okay? And I see him get on his walkie-talkie and he's like, well, I'll tell you what, I don't know what the delay is. But apparently there's only one gate person for the whole thing. Okay. And something happened. He said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you the option. You can get out and walk the rest of the way, or you can hope that this clears up. So I'm doing math in my head as to when sunrise is and all this. So I grab my gear and I get off the bus and I just start walking. Okay. So this is the visitor center. The parking lot on the left here is full. There is no more room for any cars. That's the line of cars on the right there, still waiting to get in. I have no idea what those people did. Okay, what I'm told is when this happens to you, people just abandon their cars by the side of the road and just start running. It's become an issue in this part of England because it's not a wealthy area. These people are farmers and they're tired of it. People, they trash, they relieve themselves on people's, it's a huge problem. Okay, I get to the visitor center and that's what the visitor center is. And you can't tell, but there's a bus that takes you on that road that I showed you before from there, up to the top there. So it's another 1.2 miles from the visitor center to Stonehenge. And the line to get on the buses is going around the building, okay? It goes, and I'm sitting here like, well, there's buses going all the time, so I have to make another decision. Do I want to keep walking or do I want to wait for the bus? I start walking. All right, so this is, the next slide I'm showing you is something like 4.5 minutes later. So look at the color of the sky. And that's how fast the sun was rising. You can see all these people, we're all running up there. And when we get there, the sun's already up. And you can see people coming in from all these different directions. So, I am told this is referred to as Morris dancing.
Yes.
It's a 15th century ritual. The pagans and the Druids have sort of claimed this thing for themselves, but the earliest evidence of paganism or Druidism is somewhere around the 11th or 12th century. So, but this thing's 4,500 years old. Like you're off by thousands of years, okay? But they have claimed it for themselves. So we allow the pagans and the Druids to say, well, this is our thing, right? And someone explained to me what all of those things meant, and I've since forgotten what all of those things meant. Okay, this is as close as I could get to the center. Now, I am told that if you stand in the middle and you clap your hands, or if you talk, that there will be audible vibrations that come around. That somehow it may have been an accident, but there is definitely acoustic amplification going on. You're standing in the middle, and even if I had gotten to the middle, everybody was already drunk by then. I don't think I would have heard much. Now, I'm told the reason people do this is because the local media is always there. So if you do that, it will increase the odds that somebody will interview you and you will be on TV. That's why they do it. Okay. This guy here believes he is the reincarnation of King Arthur. So every solstice he goes there and he lectures the crowd on himself. That's what he does. All right, so this is me, and one of the problems with having so many tourists there is that there is a special kind of lichen that you see there, and it only grows on those stones. And people are touching the lichen and taking souvenirs home with them. And apparently, the oil on your hands can do damage to the lichen. So I'm actually doing a bad thing. I'm actually touching it there. I wasn't aware I was doing that. Okay, that's the Professor Fay, and I couldn't believe we actually ran into each other because it's sort of the crowds parted and we were standing 5 feet apart from each other. So, oh, you made it. Apparently, it's really hard to police this whole area because she knows this one place where you can walk in where they don't guard it. And so she takes her students and they walk in every solstice, and then they do whatever it is that they do. So I had a camera set up taking video of the whole thing the whole time. And so you start the camera, and I knew that I had to go in there and do stuff. So I had to leave this thing alone. And I did that knowing that by the time I got back, that camera might not be there any longer.
Yeah.
But I got there an hour and a half later and it was still fine. And what they told me is everybody's very respectful there, which they were. They were very kind and very peaceful. We are told that the rocks have a special acoustic properties. If you put your hands on them, or you put your ears to them, that you can hear things. And I tried this, but it was just too loud. I couldn't hear anything. That's what we're told, is that there's some sort of acoustic properties. Okay, one more dancing. I had the audio there, but it was so windy. All you heard was the wind rushing past the microphone. All right. Whenever you go visit Stonehenge, they will always take you to this other one. It's Avebury Stonehenge. And this is probably the second most popular and most famous of these. And what I was saying before about how it's been only till very recently that there have been laws put up that you can't go up and disturb any of this thing. Because you can see here, they built a whole town right in the middle of the henge. And unlike Stonehenge, it only takes a couple of minutes to walk around. This one, we walked around the whole thing and it took a good part of the morning. And in fact, the stones are so far apart in some of these cases that you may not even be aware you're in the middle of a henge. This is a groove down here, see that? And supposedly there are acoustic properties if you go down there, which some of our students did. The professor warned us, it can be unpleasant down there because when there's bad weather, all of the sheep and the goats, that's where they take refuge. So that's where they dwell a lot of the time, and you have to deal with, the remains of that. So the most famous stone in Avebury Stonehenge is the one called the Avebury Barber Surgeon. So in the 14th century, this poor fellow was walking underneath this rock and it fell on him and it killed him. Okay. Now, we didn't find out about this until 1938 when we re-erected the stone and we found this guy's remains here on the top there. And he had these implements with him. And so he's been coined the Avebury Barber Surgeon. They have since determined that he could not be one of those two things. They know these things. That's not what he was, but the name is stuck. So he is the Avebury Barber Surgeon. Now, being the crass American tourist that I am, I had to get a picture of myself doing this. Everybody around here, we don't know him. Okay, so, and after all of this, we still don't know it. We had a whole section on language, like 4,500 years ago. What kind of language do we have? I mean, how do you tell somebody, go 125 miles north of here and carve me a stone that looks like that, and then come back? I mean, there are other things like the horizontal pieces. If you look at some of them, if you look at the contour of some of them, it actually matches the contour of the horizon. Like if there's a hill there, there'll be that. Like, why? Why would you do that? So I thought I would talk about this a little bit. So what I said before about the farmers in the area, they're tired of this. Okay, they're tired of the tourists. 1.2 million people come there every year, and that's this picture on the left that they show you in all the brochures. The picture on the right is the reality, and that's every day of the year. Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, if you have a proposal to build a new parking lot, it's going to take you forever to get through all the permits. So what they are proposing to do is they're going to bury that A303 road near Stonehenge. This project has been on the books for over 50 years, and they fight about it, and it's on and it's off, and it's on and it's off. I think I have a slide here. Okay, so this is what they say it's going to look like, and they're going to make it so that you can't park your car on somebody's property, and that'll make the traffic go faster because it's just a 2-lane road right now. So the picture on the upper left, Stonehenge is there. That dotted line is where the tunnel is. And there's a video you can watch. The British government has put out. It's nice, trying to make it sound nice. And at one point, the narrator says, "It's going to be very far. We're not going to be anywhere near Stonehenge. It's going to be 200 meters away." That sounds kind of close to me, doesn't it? And you're in an area where there are proven historic ruins. So as soon as you find something, they're going to have to halt construction. And I mean, it could take you forever to build this thing. So as of 2022 through today, the project is off. They're going to do it. UNESCO has said you will lose your World Heritage Site standing if you do this. And the British government says, we don't care, we're going to do it. So everybody I talk to who is a historian says, this is a bad idea. So on the bus to London, so again, 4 a.m. is to midnight, to 1 p.m. rather, you're back in London. So I thought that I would talk about Oxford just a little bit. And like I say, there are 40 individual semi-autonomous colleges. This is the edge of Exeter College, where I was the first time. And it's right near that famous building, this round thing. It's called the Radcliffe Camera. Camera is Latin for chamber or room. And it's one of the central libraries right in the center of Oxford. And there are sort of subterranean tunnels underneath there. You can get there from many of the other colleges. So on the far left, which you can just barely see where that truck is the hardest college in the world to get to. It's called All Souls College. It's only grad students, and they only admit 2 students every year. Okay, so the entrance exam for All Souls College is they give you, they sit you at a desk, and then they give you a word, and you are supposed to write for anywhere between 3 to 9 hours on that word. So one year it was water. There you go, right? And then after you write, you face a board who are experts in whatever this one word is, and you have to defend what it is that you wrote about. So it's more about your thought process than it is about what you wrote. So 2 students each year, so it's called All Souls College, and the name that the students have given it in the area is they call it No Souls College. So Oxford is the lowest point on the Thames, literally the place where the ox can ford. That's how the place got named. And there is evidence of teaching there as early as 1065. And each college is a self-contained square with high walls. And the reason they do that is because in the year 1000, it's not safe out there. So it's built to keep people out and in, so that, and there's usually a giant wooden door that is very hard to open, and that's how you get in and out of the college. So again, I was in Exeter College the first time, very compact place. And even the month or so I was there, I formed lifetime friendships because you just see the same people, you know, for 3 or 4 weeks, several times a day. You just form lifelong bonds. This one is called Christ Church College, and it's the biggest one there. Square mile wise, it is bigger than Brown University, if you were to put one on top of the other. It's so large that it doesn't feel like you're in an enclosed place. It feels like you just can go for a hike somewhere. But if you did go for a hike somewhere, eventually you'd run into a wall that you couldn't get past. That's how big this place is. So these were the classrooms that we had. And this is another quad that is inside Christchurch, and it's called the Peckwater Quad. And the Peckwater Quad is famous because back in the old days, English gentry, the young men in the family, while waiting for the father in the family to pass away, they would put them here, and they would have the top floor as their dormitory, and they would have servants and things, you know, seeing to their needs, and you would just live there until it was your turn to take over the estate. So the college is self-sufficient and it has the 4 elements that everyone must have: a place to eat, a place to sleep, a place to study, and a place to worship. What more do you need? So the picture on the upper right there is the only college that is named after a nose. This is Braze Nose College. It's named after that nose. That look familiar to anyone? Yeah. Okay, so each one of these colleges has a dining hall that looks like this. This is the one at Christ Church, and this is the biggest one there. And you've all seen what that's referencing, right? So they wanted to film it there, but the amount of time it would take to make those movies would interfere with the normal operation of the college. So they built a replica of the Christ Church dining hall at whatever studio they had in England. And as you see in the real one, there are 3 rows of tables, but there are 4 because of the 4 houses at Hogwarts. Okay, so here's the end. Now, all of the tables are in this sort of parallel arrangement, but at the very end, there is a perpendicular set of tables, and it's called the high table. It's actually not that high. It's like, what's that, 3 steps, but symbolically it's high. Okay, that's where all your professors and all of the directors, and that's where they eat. That's where they get served first. So if you are an exceptional student in some way, you will be invited to high table, dine with your professors, and it's considered a high honor. There's a little door, a little card that comes under your door, and the honor of your presence is expected at high table tonight. You know, be early. There's a hierarchy to the people serving the food. The best person is the person who serves high table. So if you go to this thing called the Oxford Experience, you can Google this, okay? Anybody can go, you just sign up. And they have all sorts of classes there that are interesting. The archaeology class is one of them. And one of the things that they do is you get to sit at high table once during your stay there. Okay, so, and it's formal. So coat and tie for men, appropriate equivalent for women. And when you are at high table, it is considered polite to make pleasant conversation among you and to compliment your professor on the job that they are doing. You're expected to do this. Okay? Now, dinners are formal there. And before we got there, there was a 32-page packet that they emailed out to us. Okay. Wow. Who reads a 32-page packet? Okay. So, right. So you're not going to blame me for what happened here. Right. Somewhere in the 32 pages, it said that the first dinner was very formal. Okay. I don't know. It's buried in there somewhere. So some of you may know I'm a cyclist and I really like, whenever I get to a new place, the first thing I do is I rent a bike and I bike around. I can see the place, I get some exercise. First dinner, I timed my bike ride so I would get in just before dinner. And I got in there and I showed up in spandex. And the thing is, the British, they're real polite, right? They're not going to say anything, they just this and they look you up and down. Yes, sir, yes. Luckily, not all the dinners are formal, but you are supposed to stand behind your chair. And at which point the dean of the college goes up to a podium on the right side here, bangs his gavel on the podium and reads an invocation and a thanks in Latin, which they have been saying for 1,000 years. And then you say amen, and then you can eat. In the corner here, this corner, this one of us discovered was actually a door. You have to kind of push, it's really well disguised. You can push on it and it's a door and it goes downstairs into this little area that's really nice. So a couple of us discovered this place and we just started studying down there until somebody came down and said, you must be a fellow of the university to be in this space. And we were not, so we did not get to go there any longer. All right, this is me again trying to be a proper English gentleman, and they're serving you this haute cuisine, right? I mean, everybody's like, "What's for dinner?" And it's one of these places where you read what's for dinner on the menu, and you still have no idea what you're eating. Okay, you know, there's no idea. It's always some mystery thing that looks really fancy like this. So this is one of the dinners that we had, and that's a piece of meat there. And I don't know if you can see that. It's buried under that onion ring and that whatever that topping is. So we were eating that. And we're like, this is like, it was okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. But I'm like, what is this stuff, right? But there's a placard in the middle of each of these tables. And I said, well, I got to find out what this is, right? So it's considered a little bit rude to get up. I got to find out. So I get there. So at the bottom, it is braised and barbecued ox cheek. And apparently what this is, so ox, they eat a lot, right? And so when they eat a lot, they use their cheek muscles a lot. So it's a really tender cut of meat. It's considered a very a good cut of meat. So each ox will feed, 2 people, and that's what that was. So it got to the point where I was really, I really appreciated being exposed to all of this new food. But after several days of this, all I wanted to do was eat at McDonald's. It did. It's good.
You walked past that.
Okay, this is one of the gardens at Christ Church, and that is a door, and that's a close-up of the door, and there's a keyhole. So Charles Dodson was a math professor at Oxford, and I think it was his daughter or his niece or something loved her father, but only professors or higher are allowed to go through that door into the next garden. So she loved her father, and every morning she would follow him to the door and peek through that keyhole and watched him leave. So Charles Dodson's pen name was Lewis Carroll, and the little girl's name was Alice. So on the lower right-hand side there, that is, I forget the name of the tree. It's an oriental something species tree. And you can see it's very old and it's being held up by those pillars there. But this is said to be the inspiration for Jabberwocky, because when the sun comes over on the right-hand side there, it casts this really mean shadows on the ground. And one of those branches they pointed out at us was alleged to be one of the branch that the Cheshire Cat sat on. Everybody was gathered around this door the first time I was there, and I didn't know why. Okay, so let's take a look. Why would they be gathered here? Well, there's a carving on there, and it appears to be a lion. There's a gargoyle carved into this stone here, and there's a wrought iron lamppost. So if you look at the description, this is the door that inspired The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. it's an office building now. Everybody wants to go through the door. I said, no, they're sick of this. It's just an office building. There's nothing back there. At any time of day or night, there will be a small crowd gathered there. They're taking pictures of themselves there. At Hallie's house? Yeah. Take tours of that. So at Exeter College, its most famous student was J.R.R. Tolkien. That's a bust of Tolkien at the top there. There's another bust of Tolkien in the hall where he used to stay and where he used to teach. The photo of the acting camera. So on the Christ Church lawn, it's always manicured perfectly, okay? You're not supposed to walk across the lawn. Guess how I found that out? There were no signs anywhere, but apparently if you're British, you just know that you're not supposed to walk across the lawn, okay? But if you're a dean or higher, you are allowed to walk across the lawn. That bell there tolls every night at 9 p.m. 101 times in honor of the first 101 students at Christ Church from all that hundreds of years ago, whatever. So what I did is I set up my camera like at this side of the square because I just wanted to film the tolling and then maybe I could use it somewhere in a video or something. So I have one of these cameras that has a pilot light on the front. It's a red light that shows you it's on. And this is the porter's office right there. You are not supposed to have the camera on a tripod at Christ Church.
Oh, yeah.
It's not written anywhere, but they could see it right from there. It is a big square. So I'm just sitting there and the bell's tolling, right? And I'm just sitting there. And these British people are running towards me, yelling into their walkie-talkies. And I'm like, I wonder who they're coming after. And I look around, I'm like, they're coming after me. They said, no, sir, you cannot have a tripod here, but luckily I got through all 101. But all throughout Oxford, you can hear that bell. And there is a very famous pub that is sort of halfway across town, and they all go there. It's like the Boar or the Bear or something like that. Everybody has to have a 1,000-year-old pub, okay? Allegedly, when you hear this bell tolling, if you book it real fast, you can get in because that's the sign for curfew. You have to be in before the 101st bell is tolled. If you book it, you can just get back in at time, so it's you don't break your curfew. That's New College there on the left. That's Magdalen College, lots of flowers in that one. And just everywhere you look, you just see these things. I think that's all I have, yeah. Anybody has any questions? I can try to make up some answers.
I can share a story with you about Stonehenge in the 1970s.
Okay,
Because I touched it.
okay,
So my wife and I were in London for the very first time. We're still kids back then. And I booked a bus tour that went first to two cathedrals, including Winchester Cathedral and then Stonehenge. Well, like your experience, the tour went very slowly to the cathedrals. And I'm really getting worried we won't get to Stonehenge before nightfall. This is January.
yeah,
So 4 o'clock, basically, it's twilight. It was also cloudy all day, but by the time we got there, which was just before, the sky cleared. And the bus just pulled to the side of the road in those days in a parking area, and there was nobody there.
wow.
We got off the bus and we walked less than 300 feet. And we spent 20-30 minutes inside of Stonehenge. Our guide gave us some information about it. There were no restrictions on what you could touch or what you could do. Everybody was respectful, fortunately. And we got back on the bus. It was dark. And we returned to London, and it was not that long thereafter that friends of mine in England said, you were one of the last to actually have that experience.
Yeah, if you remember last summer during the solstice, there were some protesters that they put some indelible orange powder on the thing. And that was done during one of the 2 days you could be there, so. Yeah, apparently, I'm told that before they put the restrictions in, college kids would say, hey, it's a Friday night, let's go do things to Stonehenge, you know? Use your imagination. That's my,
You back up a slide?
see.
Is that blue accurate?
Um. That's a good question. I don't know. It's what the camera picked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The viewing is not great there. There's a lot of lights in this area. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question though. That's how it came out of the camera. The orange is accurate though, because the light would just sort of.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Questions, comments, anything?
Can we get the guys back? Can you stop your share and we could get the guys online and see if there's any?
Stop the share?
Yeah.
Stop the share.
Share the bottom.
It should be.
Stop the share. Stop the share. Okay, here we go.
So,
Yes.
did any of your compatriots talk about the rivalry with Cambridge?
Yes. So Cambridge is an offshoot of Oxford because they thought the Oxford people were too stuck up. Cambridge, by the way, has a very similar program to this Oxford experience. If you are interested in any way, if you have the money, go. It's not cheap, but it's a great experience. And one of the women that I was with in the writing place the first time said, I'm going to go to Cambridge the second time, and then we'll meet up at Oxford. You can tell me what the difference was. So at Oxford, you have there were classes from 9 to noon, and then there was an evening lecture, and then there was maybe a lecture, in the afternoon or something. In Cambridge, they were in class from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then it was an evening lecture. And I said, how is the architecture of Cambridge compared to Oxford? She said, I never saw the place. So if you like to study, go to Cambridge. So it's sometimes referred to as Oxbridge because the two are actually kind of close together. So I was at one of the tours and I said, so tell me, what's the inside scuttlebutt of Oxford? I mean, there's a hierarchy, right? Like who looks down on who? Like what's the lowest one on the totem pole? Who do everybody makes fun of? And she says, well, that's the college I went to. It's like Sarah Lawrence College, a women's only college. I was like, oh, you got in there. Yeah, that's easy. So other than All Souls, the one is Merton College. And you can actually take a class at Merton College if you go to the Oxford experience. And apparently they are quite rigorous with you. You write papers and they'll give you feedback, and it's not easy.
What's the name of the?
Merton.
Merton.
Merton, however they say that.
Does anybody online have a question for Ed?
Can I ask a question about Stonehenge?
Yes.
Do they know what happened to the stones that seem to be missing? Were they pilfered like the pyramids for building other structures, or did they just, I mean, those are big pieces of stone that aren't there.
Right. Yep, there's been a lot of theft. People have been shipping off souvenirs for themselves for a very long time. And again, the place was not policed for a very long time.
Wow.
Some of what you saw there has actually fallen down and has been replaced. And some of those stones have had some restoration done to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Good lecture. I mean, fascinating material.
Yeah.
Anybody else online with a question?
No, you can get more cake and coffee.
All right, well then, any other questions in the room? Thank you, Ed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, we're gonna shut the doors. Good to see everybody online. Off you go.
Farewell, my brother.
Bye.